again, YouTube family, thanks for those of you who will join me on this video. And if you like the video, please give it a like. If you've not subscribed to the channel, consider subscribing. But thanks again for watching this video. I'm talking about the Democratic Party's primary, which is a non-primary really. I did a video on the Republican primary. I've done videos on at least one or two of the Republican debates. It's only fair that I talk about the Democrat Party, because even though the Democrats have the incumbent who is currently sitting in the White House, Joe Biden, there are challengers to Joe Biden for the primary, and the Democrat Party is trying as hard as they can to not have a primary. They've held no debates, and we already have some states saying they are not going to do elections. They're just going to throw all of their delegates behind Joe Biden. You have at least one of the major candidates that are running against Joe Biden, in Dean Phillips, who's filed a lawsuit against the Democrat Party in Florida, because they are one of the states that are saying, well, Joe Biden gets all of our support because there's nobody else running. And you've got Dean Phillips, who is a sitting Democrat representative currently in Congress, saying, no, I'm running. You're not giving people a chance to run against Joe Biden. And that's at issue with the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party, what they're doing is very undemocratic. It's very authoritarian to just say the voters who support us have no choice. Their choice is Joe Biden. We're not going to let them make a choice. We're not going to give them a view into other candidates and what they're running on to get so that people can make a different choice. We don't want a different choice. We want Joe Biden to be the party's nominee, and that's a problem. That's a problem. I mean, the Democrat Party is literally saying you need to vote for us this time around because democracy is on the ballot. However, we are not going to participate in democracy with our primary. It's a major problem, and it needs to be addressed. You have the major news outlets who aren't addressing it. They're all just coasting along like it's just Joe Biden. It's good old Joe. We got to vote for Joe. And most likely, the Republican Party's nominee is going to be Donald Trump. Just 2 days ago, we had the first votes drop in the Republican primary in Iowa. The Iowa caucuses were on Monday, and Donald Trump easily won. He won massively in Iowa. You have polling that indicates Nikki Haley is much closer to him in New Hampshire than anyone was in Iowa. There's the possibility that Nikki Haley could outperform in South Carolina, since that's her home state where she used to be governor, but it's looking highly likely that Donald Trump will be the Republican Party's nominee. And I do not disagree with people who say that democracy is on the ballot. You have, and it's not just a Donald Trump thing, you have the Republican Party in this Project 2025 nonsense, where Republicans are trying to figure out if we can get control of the presidency, can we set things up to where we always have control? And it has to do with putting Republican sycophants throughout government, just trying to fire people around government and replacing them with Republican sycophants. And that's a scary idea that someone would try and do that. But that is coming from a Republican think tank, not from Donald Trump. Donald Trump absolutely will go along with it if it'll keep him in power. If he was to win the 2024 election, become president, Donald Trump's already said he's going to have an upheaval in government and get rid of all of the deep state people that he thinks are working against him, which are just, it's nonsense that he's talking about just regular government employees. But, I don't disagree that democracy is on the ballot in 2024. The Republican Party is starting to realize that a majority of the people in this country don't support them, don't support their ideology, don't support what little legislative agenda they have. It's not supported by a majority of the people in this country, and so Republicans have to try different things to achieve the kind of power they want. State by state, we've seen it already with gerrymandering for years and years now. They've utilized gerrymandering in states where they have enough control to gerrymander districts and to ensure Republicans end up on the ballot state by state. As far as the Democrats, Joe Biden is no shoo-in. The Democrats are hoping that people in this country remember how horrible Donald Trump was as president and will be willing to vote against Trump, because there's no enthusiasm for people to vote for Joe Biden. A majority of Democrats would prefer someone other than Biden on the ballot. And a large majority, when you don't survey just Democrats, but you survey Democrats, Republicans, Independents, believe Joe Biden is too old and too far gone mentally to be president for another 4-year term. And that's a real problem. The fact that Joe Biden isn't able to gain traction with what he has done. And I mean, I will admit, Joe Biden has done more than I would have thought he would do. Joe Biden's accomplishments are greater than what I expected out of him. I mean, Joe Biden is very much a corrupt corporate Democrat. Is he better than Donald Trump? Yeah. But Joe Biden has had more of a robust agenda, more of a left-leaning agenda than I would have expected. I mean, some things he's done you would expect. You know, he allowed for more drilling while putting through climate, renewable energy legislation, so it's kind of a wash. And you're like, why are you doing this? And it's because he's a typical weak corporate Democrat, and he's trying to keep different groups happy. So he will pass legislation allowing more drilling for fossil fuels, while at the same time pass legislation for renewable energy that'll trying to appease the environmental people, trying to appease the more right-wing fossil fuel people, and it ends up being a wash that, you know, maybe there's a little bit of positive out of it, maybe a little bit negative, but it's mostly a wash between those two kind of counterpoints. But Joe Biden and the Democrats are hoping that Donald Trump's uniquely bad presidency, that people will remember it and will vote against Trump again. Because, let's face it, in 2020, Joe Biden won because people were voting against Donald Trump. And in 2022, Democrats had a much larger than expected amount of success because of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. 2020 also had to do with Roe versus Wade. The Trump term, he appointed the 3 ultra right-wing conservative theocratic Supreme Court justices. They got Roe v. Wade overturned, and then Republicans started to realize how unpopular that was around the country. That has helped Democrats, and Democrats, I mean, still lost control of the House, but only barely when they were supposed to be hit with a red wave or whatever. In 2022, it didn't happen. Democrats, you know, are just narrowly trailing Republicans in the House. Presumably in this election, there will be higher turnout. It's a presidential election, and Democrats should be able to retake the House. They may be able to keep a majority in the Senate, but it depends. I mean, Joe Biden is overseeing an economy that is, by all metrics, by all the historical metrics that we look at on the economy as far as the stock market and unemployment, it's a good economy. You know, as far as the long-standing historical metrics, we look at the economy and say it's a good economy based on these historical metrics. But you go and have reporters talk to people out in society, and they say it's not a good economy. It's not working for me because of the price of gas, because of the price of food at the grocery store. And the thing is, it's true. Prices are up. And wages have had a slight uptick recently, but that's in response to the pandemic pressures plus the higher than normal inflation we had in 2022. And so there was a slight uptick in wages, but that slight uptick in wages has not made up for the fact that we had 50 years almost, 40 some odd years of stagnant wages relative to inflation. So as the cost of goods and services were going up, wages stayed relatively flat. And then we had the larger than normal inflation, a large part of which was price gouging by corporations, the greedflation, or whatever you want to call it. We had higher than normal inflation, and prices went up. And as I see people interviewed, I'm not sure if they understand how inflation works, what inflation is. Because you have people who believe inflation is still up because prices are still up. But inflation isn't something that when it goes up, prices go up. When it goes down, prices go back down. Prices don't go back down. All inflation is a measure of the rate at which costs of goods and services are increasing by. And once they increase, they're not going back down. The way they would increase would be with deflation rather than inflation. And we normally have inflation in the 2 to 3% range, and it's right around the 3% range right now. So right now, inflation is just minusculely above what is normal. I mean, about 2.5 to 3%, that's what inflation historically runs at in America. And it's right around 3%. So the inflation's back down. Prices are still up because prices aren't going back down. They went up when the inflation was higher, and they're going to stay where they're at. Inflation's lower, so from where prices are at right now, they're going to rise more slowly than what they did in 2022. Plus, a lot of what was inflation, looked at as inflation in 2022, was just greedy corporate executives increasing prices so they could make extra profits, knowing that people would blame it on inflation, rather than people would blame it on the corporate executives just being greedy. And that's the way it worked out. Corporate executives were able to skate with what they did, and the news media wasn't calling them out. I mean, nowadays, you have some in the news media who are pointing out that we had greedy CEOs, greedy executives at companies that decided to jack prices up while inflation was up, which made it seem like inflation was even higher than it was. And that's why you have people like Bernie Sanders who were saying we need a windfall profits tax to counter what they were doing, so that way if you raise prices to make extra profits, if the government just taxes those profits right out from under you, then there's no point in doing it. And that was something that Bernie Sanders had suggested to work against what the executives at corporations were doing, saying if we tell them the government's just going to take that extra profit you're building in for yourself by jacking prices up, then they just won't jack the prices up, and they'll just go with normal inflation. But Joe Biden didn't bite on that. There's a lot of things he didn't bite on. Joe Biden right now has still been wholeheartedly supporting what Benjamin Netanyahu and the right-wing government in Israel is doing. And while Israel got the sympathy of the world being given to them because of what happened on October 7th with the Hamas terrorist attack, Israel turned around and destroyed all that sympathy people had for them, as people see Israel, the Israeli government, basically doing a ethnic cleansing, a genocide of the Palestinian people that doesn't seem to have an end in sight, because Israel has said that their goal is to get rid of Hamas. And Hamas is just the small group of terrorists living amongst the Palestinian population. And the only way Israel is going to know they got rid of Hamas is to either kill all Palestinians or kill a large chunk and move the rest out. That seems to be their goal, which is genocidal. And so now we have the situation we're in, where we have a Democrat primary that's trying to be suppressed by the party and also by news media. That's one of the really bothersome parts to this whole story, is that, for instance, Marianne Williamson had said that early on she would get interviews set up on like CNN or MSNBC or some mainstream news outlet, and then suddenly her campaign would be called and said, oh, we're cutting the interview. We're not doing the interview. And this happened time and time again, to where the only outlets she was able to get onto are like lower view online outlets, podcast interviews. Marianne Williamson wasn't allowed basically onto mainstream news platforms. So her voice was being suppressed in an attempt to protect Joe Biden, which, me doing this video, there are some diehard Democrat supporters who are going to say that I'm hurting Joe Biden by giving this criticism. But it needs to be given. And I'm not hurting Joe Biden. Joe Biden's hurting Joe Biden. The Democrat Party is hurting Joe Biden. All I'm doing is being honest, because when it comes to Democrats or Republicans, I vote for Democrats because they're closer to where I'm at. I'm to the left of the mainstream Democrat Party, but they're closer to me than the Republicans, who are way off in right field. And so the party I vote for, being Democrats, I want them to be a better party. I want them to do the right thing. And the right thing is, if you have people running against your incumbent, hold debates. Hold a normal primary, and if your incumbent is that great that everybody's going to go jump behind him and support him, then you have no worries about the debate or anything else. And one of the ways to push forward a weak candidate who's not prepared for a general election is to not have debates. Debates is where you hone your mind and your political skills to be able to go out and talk to people and to be able to articulate your successes. In this case, he's the incumbent. It's his job to go out and articulate the successes he's had, and if he ends up in a general election against Joe Biden, he will be able to articulate his successes versus the lack of success he'll be arguing that Joe Biden, that Trump had when he was in office. So a debate is not a bad thing. Holding debates, and the big thing is you're letting voters choose. That should be what you're doing. This is supposed to be a democracy, and you'll hear in the last 4 to 6 years, more than ever, if you listen to right-wing media, whether it's cable news, online, on the radio, wherever, you'll hear the word republic mentioned over and over when people on the right now talk about politics. politics. They'll talk about the Republic of America, the Republic of America. Whereas you listen to 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they would talk about the awesome democracy of America. Republicans have made a very concerted effort to stop talking about democracy and start talking about republic. And I don't know if that is Republican politicians and media types think that Republican voters are so stupid that they don't know what a republic is or what a democracy is. They don't know if you can have both or if they're mutually exclusive to one another. Republicans have realized when it comes to national elections for president, the odds are not in their favor of winning the popular vote nationally. And people will bring that up. Donald Trump managed to get 4 years in office despite never having won the popular vote. He was in 2 presidential elections, never won the popular vote, but got 4 years in office. So I would say he should consider himself fortunate that in a democracy he lost the popular vote both times, but still managed to get 4 years in office. Against Hillary Clinton, he lost by around 3 million votes. Against Biden in 2020, he lost the popular vote by around 7 million votes. The reality is, and even the Electoral College is how we determine who won, and that's determined by popular vote state by state. In 2016, the reality is Donald Trump narrowly won by around 50,000 votes over 4 states. In 2020, the reality is Joe Biden barely won that election by a little over 40,000 votes over 4 states. The reality is it's coming down to that in our presidential elections right now, is that there is a small group of swing states that are determining elections, and they're determining them by a very small margin. Joe Biden may have won the overall popular vote by around 7 million, but he won the necessary popular vote to win the Electoral College by around 40,000. I will go into that in this video. But with that, let's look at the data about this whole 4 states in the votes. So here I've got the 4 states, and right now, if the election was held today, all of these states are trending towards Trump. You have Nevada, which is within the margin of error. So as far as that goes, Trump could be slightly ahead, Biden could be slightly ahead. Either way, it's neck and neck. It's up for grabs. Anybody's call on who's going to end up winning Nevada. As far as Wisconsin, it's slightly above the margin of error. The margin of error for these polls run between 3% and higher, but 3 to 4%, that's typically, 2 to 4%. If you look at a poll and the margin of error is 2 to 4%, 4.5% even, that's a solid poll. That's a poll that used a methodology that's going to be decently accurate. If the margin of error is above 4.5%, I would say don't even pay attention to the poll, because it's not going to be close enough to matter. As far as Georgia and Arizona right now, Donald Trump is polling well above the margin of error. So those 2 states are definitely leaning towards Trump right now, above the margin of error. And these 4 states, by a very small amount of votes, is what gave Joe Biden the victory in 2020. As I said, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin by themselves would have ended in a tie. We would have had to have gone deeper into an election to get a winner. And there's no guarantee that Biden would have been the one coming out ahead. But that's how narrow these elections are. It's the same states in 2016 that were determining Trump, Hillary Clinton. And there's a website, I have a link to it in the source data here in the description of this video, that does a very good job of giving you a visual of where the average of the current polling is. And this is polling averages among numerous polling resource companies and colleges that do polling. Nationally, Trump's got a slight lead, 1.2%. That's within the margin of error. So maybe he's slightly ahead, maybe he's well ahead, maybe he's slightly behind. As of right now, it's a toss-up. We don't know who's going to win. Michigan, leaning towards Trump, voted for Biden in 2020. Pennsylvania, still leaning towards Biden, but well within the margin of error, barely leaning towards Biden. Nevada, leaning Trump within the margin of error. New Hampshire, Biden well above the margin of error. Arizona, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, all Trump. North Carolina's close to the margin of error, so maybe Trump's ahead by more, maybe he's not ahead by so much. And then Virginia is leaning towards Joe Biden. And it goes like this state by state, as you go through the different groups of states. Tennessee, Trump. Iowa, Trump. Texas, Trump. Wisconsin, Trump. Wisconsin, another one of those swing states Biden needs to win. California, heavily Biden, you would expect that. Minnesota, Biden, by only 3%. That's also within the margin of error. New York, Trump. Washington State, State, Trump. Ohio, Christian. Washington, New York and Washington State, Biden. Ohio, Trump. And Massachusetts, Biden. Some of those states, Biden, I can already tell you will win because they are very blue states. But some of the states that Biden needs right now are leaning towards Trump. And that's what's worrying so many people, is they don't want to end up having another 4 years of Trump. And they're afraid that Biden's ego is hubris, making him want to have a larger legacy by winning re-election, is going to end up hurting Americans by putting Trump back in office. So here we have Missouri, Alaska, Montana, Wyoming, all Trump, Colorado, Biden, Arkansas, Trump, Biden with Illinois, North Dakota, South Dakota, Indiana, all Trump. And some of those are well above the margin of error. This final graphic, you have Nebraska, West Virginia, Kansas, Idaho, Oklahoma, and Kentucky, all Trump, Maryland, New Mexico, Biden. And here is a look back at the 2020 presidential map. You can see on here the states that have the diagonal lines in them are states that were swing states, states that Biden captured narrowly and that he needs to capture again. If Biden doesn't capture those states, I don't see any path that he wins. As I said, all four of those important swing states right now are leaning towards Trump. So let's listen to these three candidates, which I guess I should go into the candidates themselves. And here are a list of candidates. The ones I have highlighted: Joe Biden, Dean Phillips, who is a sitting representative, Democrat representative in Congress, Cenk Uygur, who is the founder and a host on the Young Turks left-wing progressive news online news network. Very big network. They've got millions of subscribers and billions of views. And they do a rather good job of breaking down news honestly. Marianne Williamson, who ran in 2020. She's running again here in 2024, and she never broke through in 2020. She's got a left-leaning, more progressive platform, and that's why I've been supporting her. Since she announced she was running, she was the only one on a left-wing progressive platform. Cenk Uygur, the Young Turks founder and host, is also left-wing. He is also a progressive. And Joe Biden, of course, president, the incumbent. These other names on here who are not breaking through at all, and this list is anyone who has been able to get on the ballot in at least 5 states. Not that you would know about it, because the news isn't telling us about it, and that is one of the problems. So let's listen to the candidates themselves. I'll go in order. The first one is a News Nation interview where they've got all 3 candidates there, and let's listen to them explain what's going on.
So let's start big picture. Many Democrats, not just President Biden, are worried about all of your candidacies simply hurting President Biden, nothing more. Congressman Phillips, Democratic Senator John Fetterman described your candidacy as a dream for Donald Trump. Is that a concern of yours? You have 60 seconds.
Well, with all due respect to Senator Fetterman, the dream for Donald Trump is Joe Biden. And I think my associates, Cenk and Marianne, would agree that we are actually not united in opposition to one another. We are united in opposition to Donald Trump. And the Democratic delusion right now among senators and members of Congress that somehow we are hurting Joe Biden's chances, that's not true. Joe Biden has hurt his chances, and the reality is it's a dream come true for Donald Trump. Just want to make that clear to everybody watching.
Ms. Williamson, are you worried about your candidacy simply helping Donald Trump?
No, I absolutely agree with what Dean Phillips just said. Where the 3 of us agree is more significant than where we disagree. What we agree about is that the Democrats are sleepwalking to disaster in 2024. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion. This will be much more like 2016 than the race of 2020. And the Democratic elite are as blind now as they were in 2016 to what's going on in this country. And they think that they can just will themselves into the White House, and it doesn't work that way. There's a rumbling out there in this country, and it is not responding to what the Democrats are offering, and I think it would respond much more to what any of the 3 of us are offering.
Mr. Uygur, I know you're not worried about this issue either. No sitting president has lost the party's nomination to a primary challenger in modern U.S. history, right? And unlike Congressman Phillips and Ms. Williamson, you're on a very limited number of ballots. You're not even mentioned in a lot of major polls. Realistically, lay out for me how you have a path to victory.
Right. So there's a lot of parts to this answer. First of all, strong primaries give you strong candidates. So back in 2016, the Republicans had the toughest primary anybody's ever seen, and they won. In 2020, the Democrats had 27 people in the race, and they won. So the more voices there are in the Democratic Party against Donald Trump and in favor of Democratic policies, the better the Democratic Party does. So every one of us is helping the Democratic Party become stronger. If Joe Biden was here, let's be honest, about 10 times as many people would watch, and 10 times as many people would hear Democratic policies, Democratic arguments, and arguments against Trump. For me personally, I'm a naturalized citizen, and I'm fighting for the rights of 24 million naturalized citizens. And the 14th Amendment says that we have equal protection and due process rights. And so we're in a protected class, just like gender, race, gender identity, etc. And we're going to prove in court, and we're going to the circuit court. We're appealing in South Carolina right now as we speak.
So there you heard from all three of the candidates on that News Nation clip I pulled for this. You're able to hear all of them articulate, and the first question the guy has is your candidacy hurting Joe Biden? Someone else running against Joe Biden isn't hurting Joe Biden. Joe Biden's inability to hold debates and to debate these people and to put forward an agenda and a platform for the American people, for the Democrat base to choose who they want to vote for in a primary. Joe Biden's inability to do that's hurting Joe Biden. But them existing does not hurt Joe Biden. That's stupid, weak Democrat thing, is that you can't run against Joe Biden. You just have to support him and push him as hard as you can and hope that he manages to get past Trump. And Democrats could be making a fatal miscalculation, thinking that people's dislike of Trump is going to get Joe Biden reelected, which is not necessarily the case. And here we have a quote from Dean Phillips, one of those three significant candidates that are running against Joe Biden, where he says Americans would expect the absence of democracy in Tehran, not in Tallahassee. Our mission as Democrats is to defeat authoritarians, not become them. And that is Dean Phillips in response to his not being allowed on the Florida ballot in the primary in Florida, which I don't disagree with him that it is absolutely asinine that Democrats are playing this game. And typically, I get it. Typically, if one of the two major parties has the incumbent sitting in the White House, there is not a primary. But typically, there's not a primary challenge. It's difficult to challenge an incumbent. An incumbent has a very large platform being president where they can speak to people whenever they want. Joe Biden chooses not to speak that much because he realizes he's not that good at it. Plus, whatever cognitive issues he has because of his declining age. And this is not an ageist thing. I don't have any problem with people's age. I've got an uncle in his 90s who is way more cogent and able to put together thoughts and sentences than Joe Biden is in his 80s. I mean, there are people who are more high-functioning. Bernie Sanders is slightly older than Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders is in his 80s. If you listen to the guy talk, he can make his points very cogently. Maybe you disagree with him. Maybe you don't like his policy ideology. That's fine. But you can't say he's slipping mentally. There's no obvious slip mentally with Bernie Sanders. But there is with Joe Biden. Something Democrats are trying to hide rather than trying to say maybe we should hold a primary and look for a candidate who can win a primary to be put on the general election ballot. And Dean Phillips makes a solid point in saying that we don't expect authoritarianism here, but that's what the Democrat Party has given us. They're making themselves out to look like bad guys. They are doing it to themselves. Somebody else is not doing it to them. Okay, as far as Marianne Williamson, here is from an article talking about her policies. Among her proposals, universal health care, higher minimum wage, a domestic Marshall Plan, the cancellation of U.S. government contracts with union-busting companies, an audit of the Pentagon to cut costs, the establishment of a federal department focused on early childhood development, and rededicating drug policy efforts away from law enforcement and towards recovery and addiction treatment. I'm running for president because for the last 50 years there has been a war on the middle class in this country. You cannot have a thriving democracy where there is no thriving middle class. We're a government of the corporations and by the corporations and for the corporations, a matrix of corporate overlords that own Washington and control this country, describing the lobbying and campaign finance systems in the U.S. forms of legalized bribery, which she is not incorrect there. We have a system in this country where we have legalized bribery going on all the time with our politicians, and all Republicans in D.C., except for one, take the bribe money. The vast majority of Democrats, outside of a dozen or so in the House and 2, maybe 3 in the Senate, outside of those, all the other Democrats take the bribe. All of the other Democrats take the bribe money. She's not wrong. I mean, she has a very left-wing policy set that she's running on, and that's why I agree with her. She's more aligned with me policy-wise. So far as she is on the ballot here in Nevada, when we have our caucus in March, I think it is, I will vote for her, and that's who I'm going to caucus for. She probably will not win because there is a concerted effort to not allow her to win. Here is a quote from Williamson. The traditional role of any political party is to stay in the background until the voters have spoken. It's the voters who should be making these decisions, the voters, not the party. And that again is her talking about how the Democrat Party, along with the news media, seem to have colluded to try and make sure nobody else that's running besides Joe Biden gets attention and gets their word and their name out. And it's unfortunate. It's something the Democrat Party is going to do that's going to hurt themselves. And they'll blame it on, I would assume, progressives and people like me who bring it up that they're doing this shady stuff. As far as policy goes, and I pulled this straight off the Cenk Uygur for America website. Again, all the links to all this stuff is in the description of the video. I have a sources link piece in there where you can click on everything I got this information from. But this is from Cenk Uygur's website where he's running in the Democrat primary, and it's very good on his part because he not only talks about the policies that he supports, but as you can see over on the right hand side, he has the graph, the circle graph that shows you how popular those policies are. Time off for parents, paid family leaves, 84% of Americans support it. Higher minimum wage, 65% of Americans support it. Affordable health care, public options, 68% support it. End gerrymandering, 90% support. Fight corruption, end private financing of elections, 80% support it. Allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices, 83% support it. Aggressively address climate change, 71% of Americans support it. I mean, he's laying it out here. His policy is populist. It's not fake populist like what Donald Trump offers, but real populist. He wants to do things that the American people want done. So he has a populist campaign agenda. Now, one of the issues with Cenk Uygur is he is not a natural-born citizen, and the Constitution, one of the things it lays out to be president is you have to be a natural-born U.S. citizen. Cenk, though, has a Ivy League degree. He has a law degree. He understands what he's doing and how he's operating. And he and his lawyers believe they've come up with an argument for why he should be allowed on the ballots. And that argument is Article 1, Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. The same amendment people have been using to say that Donald Trump shouldn't be allowed on the ballot. That's also the 14th Amendment argument. But here's the Article 2, Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. No person except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible for the office of President. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not have attained the age of 35 years and been 14 years a resident within the United States. So that's the part of the Constitution where it's saying 35. That's the minimum age you have to attain to be president. And as Cenk has argued, he believes he has the answer to that. He and his lawyers have the answer to that, and that part of the 14th Amendment does away with that 35-year-old age restriction. And let's hear from the candidates themselves. When I get to Cenk, you will hear his own explanation of how this works. But first, let's go to Dean Phillips as he makes his case for being president, or at least for his campaign.
No political reward in the United States right now for simply speaking the truth.
There is some growing concern among Democrats over President Biden's polling numbers.
Close to 70% of Democrats want somebody else to run for president.
This is not a normal number for an incumbent.
I respect President Biden, but he's going to lose to Donald Trump, and that's the truth. I will not sit still. I will not be quiet in the face of numbers that are so clearly saying that we're going to be facing an emergency next November.
At least you are honest, and you're saying, no, I'm going to do it.
President Biden is facing a primary challenge from a sitting congressman, Dean Phillips of Minnesota.
I think it takes courage to throw your hat in the ring.
I woke up the morning after the 2016 election. My daughters were in tears, and I sat at the breakfast table, and I promised them that I would do something, and I did. Ran for Congress. I flipped a district blue that had been in Republican hands for 60 years.
But in your last race, you won by double digits because people like you, like a reasonable man, you get things done.
Lost my dad in Vietnam when I was 6 months old. That's how my life began. He was killed just days after the moon landing in 1969, and I think about the fact that he got to know America at its very best at a time fighting a war that reflected some of our very worst. My mom met and remarried a remarkable man, Eddie Phillips, who adopted me and brought me into an extraordinary family. I've lived on both sides of advantage. Ran our family business, built Belvedere Vodka, sold it to LVMH.
He went on to help build Talenti Gelato into a top-selling gelato brand.
How are things going in the country today? Badly.
It's staggering how desperate people are right now. And instead of telling them everything's okay, I think it's time we listen and do something about it. People can't afford their lives. Things that were affordable are no longer. Mortgage rates are going up. Fuel is too expensive. Food is too expensive. People can't afford childcare. And I'm on a mission now to do two things. To become president of the United States, to change this incredibly destructive system right now. And I'm also now on a mission to expose the truth about what is happening in our politics. The Florida Democratic Party, which is unbelievable I'm even saying these words, decided they would not have a presidential primary. They just said Joe Biden's the winner. The destruction of democracy is not unique to the right. It is happening in front of our eyes right here in your state, and it's happening in Florida right now. It's time for change. It's time for a new generation. We're going to bring joy and hope and optimism back to a country that really needs it. Stop fighting each other and start fighting for each other. That's my agenda. You don't back away from each other as Americans. If you're a patriot, you come together. And that's what this campaign is about. I'm running for president to do just that, and we're going to win. We're going to win.
I'm Marianne Williamson, and when I was growing up, America had a vibrant middle class. The average American worker had decent benefits, could afford a home, could afford a car, could afford a yearly vacation, could afford for one member of the couple to stay home if they wished, and could afford to send their kids to college. But over the last 50 years, there's been a massive transfer of wealth to the tune of $50 trillion from the bottom 90% of Americans to the top 1%, decimating America's middle class. We all owe President Biden a debt of gratitude for defeating President Trump in 2020. But with the things that they're going to be throwing at us in 2024, we need to submit to the American people an agenda of fundamental economic reform, universal health care, tuition-free colleges at state colleges and universities, higher education including tech schools, paternity and maternity leave, free child care, and a guaranteed living wage. These are things that are considered moderate positions in every other advanced democracy. But in the United States, people have been trained to expect too little. The American people have been played. What the Democratic Party should do is to truly return to the principles of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Not just alleviate people's suffering, but offer them genuine economic reform. Not just help people survive in an unjust system. The Democratic Party should end an unjust system. Washington, D.C., with a few brave exceptions, is filled with two major categories of leaders. Those who don't even care about all the suffering that's going on out there, and those who do not have the moral courage to fix it. Let me in there. I will.
ShankForAmerica.com. The idea here, guys, is let's change the course. Right now, Joe Biden is down 24 points in the economy, 19 points on jobs when he actually did better on jobs than Trump did. He's down 13 points from where he was in 2020. He is not going to win. I am running. Yes, I am a break glass in case of emergency candidate. It should not have been me. It should have been someone else, but unfortunately, it was not anyone else. We must change course. He has at best a 10% chance of winning. Donald Trump is an actual fascist. So I am running as a proxy. I'm running to win, but I'm also running as a proxy for any other candidate. We have got to get Biden out of the race. Thank you for winning in 2020. But if he loses this time around, it's not just his problem, it's all of our problems. I actually think democracy is on the line. And so if it takes me running, then that's what I'm going to do. If you guys want to have a stronger candidate in this race and you want to beat Donald Trump, you're going to make that happen. ShankForAmerica.com or in any way, volunteering, whatever you want, okay? But if I'm not your voice, I have no chance at all. So let's see if we can bring something good into the world and make a giant difference together. And you know me, I always believe that we can make a difference together. And this is the time to do it before the primaries are over. When it comes to the issue of me being a naturalized citizen, which I know we're going to get to later, if it wasn't for that, there would be no obstacles to begin with. There should be a progressive in this race. There should have been one for a long time. Marianne Williamson has been in there, but unfortunately she hasn't broken through. I have nothing but respect for her courage and her policies, etc. But at this point, we're not at progressives versus establishment. We're at 4 months left, and things must change. Otherwise, we're almost definitely going to lose to Trump.
What do you mean when you say 4 months left? I know what you mean, but explain it to the audience.
So Iowa, South Carolina primaries, caucuses, etc., starting in about 4 months. So in fact, the Nevada ballot deadline is on October 16th. So it's in a couple of days. That forces us to go now, right? And so, first of all, if Joe Biden drops out, everything is possible. Everything is possible. All the other candidates will come in. Governor Whitmer, Governor Shapiro, you name it. They will all come in, and we'll have a real primary, which we should have had from day one. By the way, when we don't do primaries, Republicans get their message out in their primaries. Is constantly talking about Republican X or Republican Y. Democrats have gotten none of their message out. We need a real strong primary. So my job is to be basically Paul Revere. Biden's going to lose. Biden's going to lose. Biden's going to lose. We got to go now. We have to change that dynamic. So I'm going to, pressure Biden to get out of the race. So if he leaves now, he's a hero. He did something incredibly magnanimous. He beat Trump last time. He was a good steward of the economy. So he retires a hero. But if he stays in, I'm going to explain to people that he's the villain. And if he loses to Trump, if I'm wrong and he beats Trump, then great. Then my apologies to Joe Biden. But that's not going to happen, and we all know that's not going to happen. So the idea is to create enough pressure on Biden. And here's how you get the pressure. One of the ways you get the pressure is everybody thinks that I have almost no chance of winning, right? Well, let's keep it real. Everybody knows that, right? They're like, oh, your name is funny. You weren't born here. You're a progressive. You're an outsider, et cetera, right? If I get to 20 or 25, panic sets in. There's no question panic sets in because there's two things that happen there. One, the other candidates go, well, Biden is enormously weak, right? Number two is Biden begins to realize the handwriting's on the wall. If this Cenk Uygur, who he probably can't pronounce, has gotten to 25, the handwriting's on the wall. He's gotta go. And by the way, Anna, the reason why this is realistic is because there are a lot of people in Washington, inside the establishment, that are trying to get Joe Biden to drop out. We need to help them. We need to create that pressure.
Okay, let me jump in. You have publicly Bill Maher, James Carville, behind the scenes, other members of the Democratic Party urging Biden to drop out, saying that this is a massive risk that will likely get Donald Trump reelected again. Why do you think that you would be an effective voice in dissuading Biden from running again?
Yeah, there's two things about that, Anna. So number one, why aren't they in the race? So look, you can say, well, what do you mean? Why should Bill Maher go in the race? Of course, James Carville's not going to go in the race. Yeah, but guys, just talking about it isn't getting anything done. So you need to actually have someone in the race that is actively pushing him out and saying, so like these polite beseeching of Joe Biden isn't working. And yes, we've got to crank up the dial. And so one of the ways you do that is you have a real candidate who actually makes a real run at him. And when you have make a real run at him, that's going to create an enormous amount of pressure rather than just chitter chatter sitting there as time runs out in Washington, D.C. Now, you're getting to an important point here. And I know some people are nervous. Well, I mean, if Joe Biden only has a 10% chance of winning and Cenk, you criticize him, does that come down to 9% or 8%? What difference does it make? He's going to lose. 10% isn't enough to win. He's massively behind. He's massively behind, okay? So instead, what the point of turning up the pressure is if you lose to Trump, it is going to be on the record. We warned you. I warned you. I came in the race in a crazy attempt to make a difference because we're on a collision course with fascism. And if Joe Biden says, yes, I am that selfish. Yes, I don't care about you guys. I don't care if democracy's on the line. I don't care if I'm 80. I don't care if I'm 180. My legacy and my ego is more important than anything else in the world. So I will stay here and try to get a two-term president because 2 terms is better than 1 term. And guys, and if you're in the press or you're out there as a voter, you all know that's what he's thinking. You all know that, right? You know that it's all about his ego and it is intensely selfish. And I'm going to say that 2,000 times on every show until he gets it through his thick head. Stop being selfish. Democracy is actually on the line. JenkForAmerica.com.
In a recent interview with the Sitch and Adams show, you had described your congressional run for California's 25th district as the worst experience of your life. In that election, you received 6.6% of the vote. It was also the worst experience of my life. What makes you think that anything would be different this time around, given the way the media treated you, given the stunts that the Democratic Party pulled against you? In order for your plan here to work, you just said it. If you start seeing support for you, 20 to 25% of the vote, that seems like you got that support, then maybe there'll be actual pressure for Biden to step down and not seek re-election. But what makes you think you're going to get anywhere near that, considering what you've already experienced with the media's treatment of you?
Yeah, so I'm under no delusion that mainstream media is going to be all of a sudden, oh, Cenk Uygur, we've changed our minds.
No, they're going to be vicious.
Yeah,
Yep.
no, I know how mainstream media works, and I said it today in another interview. They will lie, they will smear me. There's no question. That's what they do to every progressive. And if you're in mainstream media and you're pretending that you're not biased against progressives, that is hilarious. And then you will make that pretense in the middle of an article where you attack me. Go ahead, you know you're going to. There isn't going to be one positive article about it, right? But hey, I'm also trying to get your beloved Whitmers and Newsoms, et cetera, into the race.
Don't say Newsom.
Okay, I know that you're not in favor of it, but that's a different conversation. So I don't think that the mainstream media is going to be any different. No, there's two things that are different, Anna. One is, I'm not the only one who thinks Joe Biden needs to get out of the race and we need to have a real primary. Tons of people, about 72% of Democratic voters want it. And Democratic Party, what is wrong with you that you ignore 72% of your voters who scream, give us another candidate? So if you didn't want me in the race, well, then you should have given him another candidate, okay? And if you didn't give him that, you got me instead. So deal with it. Now, in terms of why it's different in terms of being able to break through. In the congressional run, we couldn't break through. Why not? Because they smeared me. And by the way, if I read the LA Times article and I was a voter in the 25th congressional district and I heard nothing else about me, I would have voted against me. Because the lies and the smears in there were unreal. I mean, they said I was anti-Muslim. I wouldn't vote for a guy who's anti-Muslim. They didn't tell people that I'm actually Muslim, that my background's Muslim, right? Etc. So, but this time, it's a little bit different media dynamic. So now we have a great number of online shows. We have more liberal outlets, conservative outlets, independent outlets, like you name it. We've got every kind of outlet there is in online, in radio. I've been on black radio. I'm going to go back onto black radio. I'm going to go back onto every kind of outlet that will have me on. And my guess is a lot of outlets will have me on. In the old days, mainstream media can freeze you out, right? And then you're done for. They smear you, oh, this guy's anti-Muslim, and they anti-this, anti-that, and then you never get your voice out. Well, now, look, guys, here, I'm going to keep it real. When an online show has me on, the views are going to go up because people are interested in it. And so if maybe the entire internet will say, no, we're not interested in views. No, we're not interested in Cenk. We're not interested in another choice. Biden's got it. Biden's on cruise control here. He's definitely going to win. My guess is a lot of shows, wherever they are on the political spectrum, are going to go, oh, okay, there's a fight, okay? And now there's a real challenge. And look, one of my advantages is I am loud. And so that is sometimes a disadvantage. But in this case, someone's got to scream from the rooftops. Biden's going to lose. Biden's going to lose. We've got to get another candidate. But the advantage I have is, yes, I'm loud. I'm a warrior, and I will make this case. Not only the case that Biden's got to go, but our case. So even though this is not progressive versus establishment, and I will take any candidate, myself or others, that is going to beat Trump, yes, but our policies are more popular. And I'm not afraid to say it. And so you almost never hear someone forcefully making the argument. Why haven't they done paid family leave? 84%. Republicans wanted, Democrats wanted paid family leave, give moms 12 weeks off. For constitutional grounds, so I've talked to you before about the 14th Amendment, and if you get into the details a little bit more, we're making a case that the 14th Amendment explicitly repealed the natural born citizen clause because it is the only natural and born and naturalized or only mentioned in the Constitution in those two places. Must be a natural born citizen. Then the 14th Amendment says, no, born or naturalized, you have due process and equal rights, okay? So we think And we make an excellent case for other court cases that show that amendments are explicitly repealed without saying, oh, by the way, we are repealing that part of the amendment. In fact, the 14th Amendment repeals the 3/5 clause that black people are 3/5 and never mentions it. So, but it is still considered an explicit repeal of it. And then we have a great case for an implicit repeal. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on the legal issues. We have an excellent case for a First Amendment issue, not only for me, but a South Carolina Democratic voter who is a supporter of mine has joined the case.
Oh, wow.
And now we are suing together. And he's saying, how about my First Amendment rights? You're not letting me vote. You're taking my voice. This is the person I want to vote for, and you're not letting me do it. I have rights.
There you heard from all three of the candidates, Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson, and Cenk Uygur, one after the other. Dean Phillips is the sitting Democrat in Congress who's running against Joe Biden. Marianne Williamson ran in 2020. She's running again this year. And Cenk Uygur. Cenk Uygur, if you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for making it this far in the video. I realize it's running long. I apologize. Cenk Uygur, at the end of his video, explained his legal argument for being a naturalized citizen and being able to run for president. It would be huge if this was taken up by the Supreme Court and they decided that, yes, as a naturalized citizen, you can run for president because of the 14th Amendment. But as of right now, Cenk probably is the most long shot of these three long shots because of that fact, because he still needs litigation to verify whether he can run or not, because you've got the 35-year-old age restriction put forth by the Constitution and the Cenk Uygur argument, he and his lawyer's argument that the 14th Amendment does away with that 35-year-old age restriction. As far as Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson, their videos came straight from their campaign websites, as did the Cenk Uygur campaign. It was on his website video. It was a video on his website. He has a lot of videos on his website because he is, again, as I said before, is the founder and a co-host of the TYT online progressive news network. So he has a benefit in that category that he has his own network that he can promote himself on. It looks like, to be fair, he's not constantly putting himself on there to talk about campaign stuff. They're still, it looks like, doing a lot of news stories. I see in the news, in my YouTube feed, there's lots of various stories that have nothing to do with Cenk Uygur running for president coming out every day after day from TYT. But they all laid it out, why they're running. And there is legitimacy to what they're saying. They're afraid that Joe Biden will not beat Donald Trump in 2024. And I don't know that there's anybody in this country that's excited to vote for Joe Biden. People would be voting for Joe Biden to ensure Trump does not get back into office. And I don't know if that's enough of a motivating factor to get people to go out and vote. And so, two big things. You have Joe Biden's support of the right-wing Israeli government and what they are doing, the atrocities, the war crimes they're committing in Gaza against the Palestinian people. That has turned Muslim Americans off to Joe Biden. And you had a lot of Muslim Americans say they will vote down ballot. They will not vote for president because they will not vote for Trump, and they will not vote for Biden now because of his unwavering support of the genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Also, you have young voters who were very favorable of Joe Biden because he was saying he was going to get rid of some of their college debt. That is something that is plaguing young people more than older voters. And Joe Biden so far has got a small amount of that done. He's done more student loan forgiveness than any other president in history. That's simply because no other president has really done it, I don't think. But Joe Biden has done a little bit in that direction. But the combination of the lack of student loan forgiveness that he had was a talking point on his 2020 run, and the support of the right-wing Israeli government assaulting Gaza and basically carrying out a genocide and committing war crimes, those two things are causing younger voters to drop off the Biden bandwagon. And younger voters, Biden carried the younger voters by a massive margin in 2020. And the thing is, younger voters, they're not as quick to show up to the poll and vote as older voters are. And one of the things that Democrats need to do, Democrats have a majority of this country siding with them on issues, on policies. Democrats have to give those people a reason to go out and vote. And that's my fear. On the Republican side, you have plenty of people who are super excited to go out and vote for Donald Trump. They are going to show up. We don't know if people on the Democrat side will show up in enough force to prevent a Donald Trump second term. And again, to me, it's not hyperbolic to say democracy is on the line, because Donald Trump has laid it out very clearly. If he gets back into office, he is going to spend his time there looking for revenge on anyone he thinks wronged him. That is, people in the news media, people in the Democrat politics, people in Republican politics, the rhinos, as they call them. Everybody Donald Trump feels like slighted him in any way. If he gets back into office, he's going to be attacking all of them. So we won't get anything, much if anything, accomplished in a second Donald Trump term, as he tries to figure out ways to get revenge on people that made him mad, that hurt his feelings, his whiny-ass little feelings. But what we don't need is another term of Donald Trump. And that's what the Democrats are hoping for, is that people's dislike of Donald Trump will be able to have someone as low energy as Joe Biden, who's desperately trying not to have to politic, who's not wanting to have to compete in a primary, not wanting to have to debate. They're hoping his weak old ass will get pushed across the finish line by people's dislike of Trump. And I go in with these three candidates that are running against him. I don't know that people's dislike of Trump is strong enough to get them to go out and vote for a corrupt corporate Democrat like Joe Biden, who really isn't inspiring them to go out and vote, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't know that Joe Biden will get people off the couch to go out and vote. And I don't know that the people's memory and their hatred of Donald Trump will get them to go out and vote. It does bode poorly for this country if Donald Trump gets a second term in office. And he didn't want to leave after his first term. Do you think he'll want to leave after a second term? But you heard from the candidates themselves. You can see what's going on. I mean, tell me the last time you saw one of these three. Marianne Williamson won in 2020, or ran in 2020. She's running this year in the primary, and she has consistently polled above Republicans on the Republican side who got to show up to debates. Marianne Williamson has consistently polled in the 6 to 12% range. There are very few Republicans on the Republican side that polled in that range. And they got town halls, and they got to go to debates. She can't even get on cable news. There's such a concerted effort to suppress everyone who's trying to challenge Joe Biden. And that, again, is one of those things that is working against the Democrat Party. And if you hear the Democrats whine, if Democrats go into 2024 and lose, and they try to whine, and they try to blame people who ran against Joe Biden for the reason why Joe Biden lost, please remember, it's not them. It is the Democrat Party and Joe Biden. They decided to go authoritarian and say we are not allowing people to compete in a democracy in the Democrat primary. They're basically saying the Democrat Party is an exclusive club and we get to decide whether you get your voice heard or not. And that's not making yourself any better. I mean, they're arguing authoritarianism on Trump's part, that he wants to be a dictator. Meanwhile, they are being dictators in how they run their primary. They're not making a good argument. It's not a good look optically for what they're doing. The Democrat Party has to realize at some point, I don't know, maybe they don't have the capacity to realize how absurd it is that they're not allowing these people to compete in their primary. It's frustrating for me. And by all means, let me know what you think. If you think I'm hurting Joe Biden because of doing this video, let me know. In my view, he's hurting himself. The Democrat Party is hurting themselves and hurting Joe Biden by what they're doing. But let me know in the comments. Again, if you like the video, give me a like, subscribe. By all means, thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a good day.